As the global leader for this dimension of our business, one of my key roles is to make sure that we engage with PFM leaders and practitioners who are interested clearly in the betterment of the many dimensions of PFM, and that we do that both effectively and as frequently as possible. And so the partnership that we have with Kevin and his colleagues is a dimension of that. We really do this in two key ways. The first is that we invest in innovative solutions and methods to strengthen the practice of PFM, and the second is that we engage directly with our practitioner colleagues in the exchange of ideas, experience, what we think is leading practice, as much as anything is a contribution to the profession. And indeed, of course, this is what today's purpose for the webinar is. We're pleased to share the perspective and experience of a couple of very key cases about how to perform effective strategic expenditure and performance reviews in the pursuit, really, of improved outcomes, stronger finances, and better services at the same time. We believe that that really does lie at the heart and the purpose of PFM. Our business is structured around the services that we provide. We have divided that into 10 robust dimensions that we think apply to each of the major areas of the practice and delivery of public financial management, tied primarily to the core of the budget cycle, but also covering the various dimensions of public reporting and accounting, of course, in information technology management, but most importantly, really, the effectiveness and performance of the way that public resources are allocated and delivery outcomes achieved. So one of the things that we did, and this was published, roughly speaking, 8 months ago, is that we engaged in some basic research around how to conduct effective expenditure and performance reviews. And that bit of research, we think, has highlighted some key dimensions, and we would encourage you to please have access to that particular document, but also, of course, some of the case examples are what we're here to talk to you about today. And so if there were three key conclusions, we have determined that the design, the diagnosis phases, and the delivery phases of expenditure and performance reviews are each in their way vital for the overall effectiveness, again, of ensuring that as public resources are allocated, they are done so efficiently and, most importantly, effectively to be able to actually deliver what the government priorities are. And so while hopefully that is intuitive for many of the people who are on the webinar today, our experience is that an incredible amount of discipline is required to achieve the benefits of strategic expenditure and performance reviews. And those benefits are the actual implementation, improvements, and reforms of the delivery of the various dimensions of public service. And so now I'm very happy to turn over most of this agenda to my partners from the MENA region and from Oceania to discuss two recent case examples where we have worked with high-profile governments. And the first focuses on pricing reforms in the Middle East. And I'm very proud now to hand it over to my friend and very capable colleague, Mohammed Al-Kassanwa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Kevin. I hope you guys can hear me now. My name is Mohammed Al-Kassanwa. I'm the lead partner for PFM in the MENA region. I'm very honored and that I'll be talking to you, walking you through two case studies that we've recently delivered here for two key clients of ours in the MENA region, specifically from Kuwait Ministry of Finance and from United Arab Emirates, the Department of Finance in Abu Dhabi. I'll be moving to the next slide. Just as a context, As you know, Kuwait and UAE, along with the other oil-producing countries in this region, were facing the challenges of declining crude oil prices and rising public expenditures. These countries have been highly dependent on revenues from the sale of crude oil. For Kuwait, it accounted for about 94% of its total revenue, and for UAE, it was about 65%. The economies of both Kuwait and UAE have been characterized by a lack of diversification, which varies between the two countries, but this is just a general observation on both countries. And as well as the contribution of non-oil revenue to their GDP was very low, was about 4% and 9% respectively for Kuwait and UAE. The fall in crude oil prices, a lack of diversification, and the rise of public expenditures to about $63 billion for Kuwait and $118 billion for UAE led to a situation where the rate of increase in expenditure was higher than the rate of increase in revenue, all of which leading to a forecasted fiscal deficit after many years of fiscal surplus. This situation led both Kuwait and UAE to look for ways to increase non-oil revenue through reforms that would help them reduce the forecasted fiscal deficit. Both Kuwait and UAE initiated similar reforms to increase non-oil revenue through the repricing of government-provided services as well as subsidized goods and services. For Kuwait, the country initiated reforms to the public financial structure to increase its non-oil revenue and rationalize the utilization of public facilities and services. The government of Kuwait carried out these reforms through an end-to-end transformation process, and they've tackled both direct and indirect subsidies. To tackle the indirect subsidy reforms, the government looked at repricing of the goods and services provided to the citizens of Kuwait and residents of Kuwait. The total revenue from these goods and services were about $3.5 billion out of a total revenue of about $83 billion, and they all came from about selling or providing services of about roughly around 5,000 public services to its citizens and residents. They've engaged in a study with the help of EY. The study spanned for a period of 30 months. And during that, we've done a lot of data collection, digitization of their data, created a catalog of all of the goods and services provided by the government of Kuwait. We've customized costing models to estimate the cost incurred by the government to deliver such goods and services. We've done a lot of benchmark studies on the prices of these goods and services within the GCC and also across the globe. We've then created and customized a pricing model for these goods and services to maximize their revenue, the revenue that is being generated from these goods and services, taking into consideration aspects of social justice. And we've given recommendations to the government around what the prices and the fair prices and the new prices should look like. This was the indirect aspect of subsidies. On the direct subject of direct subsidies, the work that the government undertook with the help of EY was around analyzing the subsidy bill, which was around $17 billion, representing roughly 23% of their total government expenditure. That covered about 42 subsidized items across 11 categories. We've done a study with them for about 6 months. We've looked and analyzed the past final accounts and consumption trends to understand the complete subsidy burden on the government of Kuwait. We've helped them redesign subsidy policies, taking into account fiscal challenges and social principles. We've also worked with them on developing specific models to acquire and calculate the required subsidy reduction and revision of pricing for energy subsidies, which accounted for about 70% of the total subsidy provided. And of course, we have helped them to push for the subsidy reform around energy and other categories as well with their National Assembly and the rest of the government. The study that we've done with the government of Kuwait led to significant improvements, not only in expenditure rationalization and revenue enhancement, but also in efficiency and effectiveness in decision making. We've looked at it from 2 different angles: the economic and fiscal impact, and that actually have helped to estimate an increase in revenue for them for about an increase about 80% from the repricing of existing services and introduction of new services. The approach that was developed to achieve this target in a phased manner to minimize economic shocks as well, and to manage the inflation impact as a result of the increase in some of these goods and services. On the subsidy bill, we've done the study that they have undertaken. The government has helped them actually put a program that will make them save roughly $28 billion over the next few years, as well as a reduction in wasteful consumption of electricity and water for about 10% and 8% respectively. From the administrative and operational impact, the work and the information that we've gathered helped them become more transparent in dealing with and assessing the service qualities and the way they are delivering these services to their citizens. We've helped them in adopting for the first time methodologies and models to calculate the costs of providing these services as well as repricing them. Moving on to the next slide, and this is the case of Abu Dhabi Department of Finance. In the UAE, the Emirates of Abu Dhabi, which was impacted as well by low crude oil prices, initiated reforms similar to Kuwait. The objectives of these reforms were to diversify and enhance the revenue sources for the Abu Dhabi government away from hydrocarbon, and to reduce the government cost without compromising on the quality of the services provided by the government. In addition to costing and pricing services related to 21 entities, a costing system was designed and developed and implemented. We have taken a similar approach to the one we have done in Kuwait, which is in terms of collecting the data and creating a full, complete catalog of the government services, as well as doing a lot of benchmark studies. But in addition to what we did in Kuwait, we've helped the government there to automate a costing model and a repricing model for these services, and it's a full-fledged model integrated with their ERP system, which can calculate costs of public commodities and suggests new prices based on certain parameters that they are flexible to select and choose. The work that we've done at the Department of Finance enabled them to build a sustainable practice for managing these costs, as well as I mentioned, developing one system, an IT system that's fully integrated with the different IT systems that they have, and which enable them to produce different reports and assess effectiveness and efficiencies around budgets, as well as cost of producing and availing services to the public. Finally, the work that has been done in both countries is very complex, was very strategic for them and very political as well. There was many lessons learned and many challenges as it cuts across the entire government. We've learned that it's very important for governments to have the right digital data and digital records of its services. Both entities and both governments had a lot of paper-based records or data that was fragmented across various sources. Digitizing the data into a single database helped in conducting further analysis and modeling. The developed database allows for future study analysis to be conducted in a transparent manner and a much faster way than what's currently being done. Customizing data collection to the need of the study was very important. The expansiveness of the data to be collected is always daunting and needs a lot of focus, and it changes all the time. Data collection instruments covering goods, services, prices, and other details were customized for the needs of the study to allow for faster collection of relevant data and not to be lost with a huge amount of data that did not really add any value to the objectives of the study and the targets of the government. Developing customized models were also important. There's nothing one size fits all. While the objectives might be the same, there are always differences, as you all know, that one needs to consider and account for. Customized models were built to accommodate the local context, data availability, and design principles to process expenditure financials, goods and services data from the field and government personnel. This is in a short, and I hope that you found the summary helpful and insightful. And with this, I conclude, and I hand over back to Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Mohammed. And I think the next one now is that we're going to share with you an experience from the Oceania region, in particular from our colleagues in Australia. And of course, it is the middle of the night there. So what we have done is we have prepared a presentation that will now be done in a virtual way, but hopefully no less effectively. So, Kevin?
Hello, my name's Bruce Hunter, and I'm EY's Oceania Government Advisory Leader. Oceania in our context is Australia and New Zealand. I'm delighted to be presenting to you today, although I can't be live, given the time that you're listening to my presentation will be 3 a.m. my time in downtown Canberra, Australia. I'm really pleased to be able to present to you today our thinking around matching resources to priorities, and we'll do that talking about sustainability and effectiveness reviews. From this point on, I'll talk about refer to those as these reviews to make it easier, and so I'm not just continuing to regurgitate the same words. Before I go any further though, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I've been with EY for 6 years. Matter of fact, today is my 6th anniversary, so you can congratulate me afterwards. I've got a range of different roles, so I've now been a senior partner with EY for 6 years, but I also come out of the Commonwealth Australian Public Service. Whilst in the Australian Public Service, my last role, I was the Deputy Secretary and Chief Operating Officer at the then Department of Families, Housing, Community Services and Indigenous Affairs. That's a big name, but it was a big portfolio, and it ran out the welfare for our country, and back then was responsible for $77 billion per annum. My role, I supported 5 ministers. I had over 2,000 staff, and I supported and had oversight of 15 portfolio bodies or subsidiary agencies, depending on your terminology. You can see by my picture that it did take its toll on me, this role. I'm sure when I started I had hair, but anyway, that's another story. Since being at EY, I've led a number of these types of reviews, most recently in the Commonwealth Government's Functional and Efficiency Review Program, which was part of the Commonwealth Government's smaller government and contestability program. You can see there that I've run these types of reviews for line agencies, central agencies, policy departments, service delivery agencies, as well as regulators. I've also conducted these types of reviews across the other Commonwealth departments and state and territory departments as well. To set the scene for today, well, why are these reviews important? Well, I think it doesn't matter where you are in the world, everywhere is experiencing rising fiscal imbalance. And by that I mean decreasing revenues, increasing expenditure, and high debt levels. All of this on the backdrop of rising expectations for citizens. So, today I want to share with you our experiences and insights of the way that we've conducted these reviews across both Australia and New Zealand, and to share with you some of our insights and success factors of actually conducting them. But no matter which way we go, each review ultimately focuses on achieving alignment of government resources to government priorities. So let's get on with it. So what are the objectives of these reviews? First and foremost, to determine or refine the purpose of the department or portfolio in serving the government of the day. To determine whether the functions and current resourcing level of the department or portfolio align with government priorities. And to also work through if these functions are being undertaken or delivered in the most appropriate way, and to also test alternative approaches to delivering those functions. We also want to look at ways or identifying barriers that are either impeding the way that a government department or portfolio is currently delivering those services or functions, and also coming up with solutions to help them actually improve outcomes. From a benefits point of view, this slide basically reframes what I just mentioned from the objectives point of view. I won't spend long on it, but really this is to promote a responsive and a streamlined public service no matter where we are. Now, the way that EY conducts these, I will take you through then our methodology on the way that we've approached these types of reviews. We do this on a 4-question sort of approach. Let me just take you through on the left-hand side. The first part is, the current assessment, and then you can see the future state assessment. But let me just spend a bit of time on this slide. All right, our 4 questions. Is this function required? Second question, should this function be performed by government? The next one, should this function be owned by the department or portfolio? And then lastly, can the function be improved? So let's just step this through. From a current state assessment point of view, is this function required? If the answer is no, well then let's cease it. And straight away that generates efficiencies and qualitative benefits. But if that function is required, should it be performed by government? And if the answer to that is no, under Australia's federated model, we then think about, well, should that be transferred to the states? Should it be transferred to the private sector or NGOs? And if we're going to do that, we would expect efficiencies and extra benefits to be delivered from that. But let's say that this function should be performed by government. So now we're starting to move into the future state assessment. So now it is, should this function be owned by the department or portfolio? And if the answer to that is no, where does this now sit across the whole suite of government services? Is it better placed in another department or portfolio? But if the answer to that is yes, we now want to know if that service can be or function can be improved. And if the answer to that, of course, is no, well then we want to continue business as usual, we want to continue to do our monitoring. But if the answer to that is yes, well then very much we want to then move into our future state assessment. We want to look at alternate service delivery options. We want to think about how they might be able to run their business more effectively. So then if we move into how do we actually undertake these reviews? So we look at this from an operating model perspective. I won't take you through this in any detail, but it's fair to say that there is no stones left unturned. We basically look at this from the top level from what the department's purpose is. Let's talk about the evaluations. Let's talk about programs. Let's talk about the significant administrative expenditure on behalf of government, all the way through to how is the department or portfolio being governed? What is its span of control? What is its property footprint? What's its use of IT? What's the span of control and value of its employees? And what's its value for money proposition for contractors and consultants? I think it's fair to say that that gives you a picture that we will go right across and do a very holistic review, making sure that the department or portfolio is best placed to deliver on government outcomes. If I take you through our 6-stage approach, which is not a one-size-fits-all by any means. As I mentioned at the outset, we have conducted these reviews for line agencies, central agencies, policy departments, service delivery agencies, and regulators and program managers. In each one, we use this same sort of approach, but we modify to reflect what the roles of that department or portfolio. It starts with the project mobilization, which, there's a significant number of data requests and a whole range of things to get the engagement set up properly. But then we move into the current state. And the current state requires a significant amount of stakeholder engagement, but also looking across and doing significant analysis of the organisational performance and its financial baseline to better understand where we think this organisation should be, or to understand where it is at the moment. And from the discussions that we have with a range of executives and work, so we do one-on-one discussions with executives, we do a number of workshops to be able to work out very quickly to go a mile wide and an inch deep, to then to be able to determine where can we make the biggest impact from a review of this nature. We also will look to go across the whole of the public service and meet with other departmental heads. We call them secretaries or director generals in the states, to get a sense of how they believe the portfolio or department we are reviewing is performing or areas for improvement. At the same time, in the current state, we'll be looking for benchmarking across other government agencies, not just domestically, but internationally. And one of the luxuries of being a Big Four firm like us as EY is that we have an extensive database to be able to benchmark those services against. We then move into future state. And at this point, we engage with the portfolio minister. We want to understand if that portfolio, how they see the department's performance at the moment. We want to understand their current priorities and their future priorities. And we want to make sure we want to get their sense of how the department is performing today and how it can improve for the future. Once we've got all of that, and if you come back to our 4 questions, and we're now into the point of it should be a role of government, it should be performed by this department, and now we're looking for can it be improved. We run the contestability framework ruler over it, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we talk about a transition plan and development, and then we move into reporting. Important to say that our reporting arrangements, we don't just do this at the end, we run it in parallel pretty much right from the start to ensure that we're not missing anything. But under item 6, you can see that the approach, recommendations, etc., gives you a sense of the way that our reports are laid out. The important aspect there is the financial implications. We make sure that we rigorously cost these reviews, so any efficiencies or investment opportunities that we put forward are actually costed on the basis of the government budgetary framework. So they can be used for cabinet, or they can be taken from a line agency and be used with a central agency. And then we put forward an implementation plan. I'm very proud to say that from all the reviews that we've put forward, the one thing that really resonates with all of our clients is that we put forward implementable recommendations. And I think the strength of that is based on that we've got people like myself that have got very significant careers in the public service, as well as now significant consulting experience as well. These types of reviews take between 3 to 5 months, depending on the scale and the portfolio. So it's a significant investment, and so therefore you want a significant return. And I am pleased to say that in all reviews that we've conducted, we've generated or identified significant savings opportunities of various natures, which I can talk about a bit later as well. Now, if I take you to our contestability framework, I won't go through this in any great detail, but again, we're into that fourth question, if you think about where I was. Should this function be continued? Is this a role for government? Is it the role for this department, and can it be improved? Again, this is where we are at. So now we're in the, yes, we're looking for improvement opportunities. So we want to work out what's core and non-core to that department. And as part of that, we've actually helped determine its future purpose. And so then we're able to align what is core and non-core. Out of that, we then can look at transactions to think about all types of functions and services that could be performed by the private sector or other entities. And we want to work out if it's best to take it to market by a single transaction or by bundling, and the types of ways that you could take it to market by divesting, outsourcing, joint ventures, etc. While we don't go and test the market broadly, we use our intel and our background to be able to sit back and think about, does the market have the capacity, capability, and appetite to deliver these functions? And so that government can be well informed that these, if whatever we put through this contestability framework, can be delivered by the market. As I go through all of this, let's not forget that the key focus of all of these reviews is the outcomes to citizens. We're trying to help the government of the day position itself and make sure that the alignment of its scarce resources are aligned to its priorities to be able to help achieve the outcomes it desires for the citizens of its nation, not only today, but for the future. Let me just share with you now a couple of our insights and observations and some of the critical success factors that we see. I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide. Okay, so from an observations point of view, in every review such as this that we've undertaken, we find that the department or portfolio's purpose is often not clear. By that I mean, it's out of date and it's not taking it to the future that the government wants it to be. And it's not inspiring the hearts and minds of its staff to be able to deliver on those outcomes. This is something that we think is drastically important to be able to set a clear purpose for the department or portfolio in serving the government of the day and in delivering those outcomes. We can't underestimate how important this is to stress and inspire the hearts and mind of its staff to deliver it. The next one is around cost-cutting pressures have eroded the strategic policy and data analytic capability of departments and portfolios. This in itself is something that we've seen doesn't matter where it sits. A number of times in these types of reviews, we find that there is investment required in these areas rather than efficiencies to be able to help it align resources to the government priorities and also help the government of the day to set a forward agenda. Clearly, with election cycles and the 24/7 media cycles, it's very difficult for a government to actually look up and out and think 5 years ahead and 10 years ahead rather than the current pressures of today. But do they need to own this capability? This is where we've thought that they could either use think tanks or academia rather than owning it themselves and use a leverage model to actually have those strategic policy and data analytics capability. We've also found that legacy programs have been inherited over successive governments and successive decades. This is where programs haven't been evaluated for many years, or they've actually been overtaken by omnibus-type programs that now make those programs redundant. It sounds easy, but this type of review comes in and is able to question those programs that may not have been checked for many years and to actually assess if they're still required. There are significant efficiencies and savings to be had here, we have identified, but some are not always easy decisions. We find consistently that manual processes and outdated systems continues to divert vital resources from strategic thinking and high value tasks to more sort of low value tasks. And this continues to be a challenge, and in most reviews we look at what investment is required to bring those systems and processes up to speed and think outside the square that you're currently in, thinking about automation and other opportunities of today to be able to lower your cost of transactional services and move away from low cost, low value transactions to higher value strategic thinking. We consistently see that the staff profiles across the public service are continuing to increase with lower levels of span of control. This means that we're paying more for lower value transactions because our staff numbers, our staff profile continues to increase. We're paying them more, but we're expecting less from them. At the same time, that is having an impact on the spans of control. This is a wicked problem that I think is happening across all governments, and it's a difficult thing to address, but it also needs to be taken in the context of market conditions. Staffing reductions and efficiency dividends is also increasing the use of contractors, consultants, and again, this is starting to move into business as usual activities and needs to be challenged from the value for money proposition. And I've taken you through some of our approach and some of our insights. I've also talked about the way we've conducted these reviews, but in each instance we have identified implementable recommendations and solutions that will generate significant savings. Some from tens of hundreds of millions over the forward estimates, but some may range from a department or portfolio that is really lean, and as now it looks as the programs that they run haven't been evaluated, or there's opportunities to streamline those programs. There's significant expenditure to be generated and opportunities for efficiencies. On the flip side, we find some departments or portfolios that are doing fantastic on their program delivery and evaluations, but however, are still challenged by the operations of the department. So there's not a one-size-fits-all, and depending on the scope and scale and the focus of that department or portfolio, we need to modify our approach. A couple of other things before I wrap up. These reviews challenge the agility, structure and governance of departments and portfolios. I believe that these should be conducted on a 5-year cycle and then be supplemented by capability reviews. I think that once you've got the alignment of government resources to government priorities, you then need to think about the capability that's required to deliver it. And does that department or portfolio have the capability today? And if not, what does it need to do to get that? I think also the 5-year cycle starts to challenge where the government of the day is heading. In Australia, back in 2007, we had a government that was in place for around 11 years. And that government, being in power for that time, was absolutely looking for strategic policy capability and advice about the forward estimates and the future for our nation. At that point, though, we had a change of government. And of course, then, with the government being in power for 11 years or so, means that the opposition had been out of power for 11 years or so. And they were no longer looking for the public service to be the idea broker or the idea generator. It was looking for the public service to be an implementer of their ideas. And at that point, our public service was caught short. And we had some significant issues. The court found that we were focused on our capability was focused on strategic policy rather than implementing. And now, if you look at the public service, it's now switched. We've got very much about implementation and program managers and all of that. We don't have that strategic policy and data analytics capability. So I think a 5-year cycle maintains the nimbleness of the public service and independence to be able to challenge that, so it stays attuned to the government. That's a lesson from us. So in closing, the success factors of these types of reviews. I talked about stakeholder engagement. You need buy-in from the most senior stakeholders in government, from the minister to the cabinet, all across the secretaries or director generals and heads of government, to be able to make sure that these are joined up. You want effective stakeholder management throughout the review, across the service, but also within the department or portfolio. Independence is an absolute must. It challenges where the department or portfolio is, and in one of the types of reviews that we've done in the Commonwealth, all of those reviews are cabinet in confidence. That means that they won't see the light of day for 30 years. That means that the independent reviewer can be frank and fearless in its advice to government on the way that it sees its department or portfolio operating and opportunities for improvements with its program suite. However, it also means, on the flip side, that cabinet in confidence nature means the government of the day can take stock of those recommendations and work out if it wants to take those decisions and go forward without retribution if it decides not to take a recommendation and actually go a different course. It doesn't need to justify why it hasn't taken a recommendation of that review, and it doesn't need to be justified in the media cycle. It won't see the light for 30 years and things will have moved on from that. But I think that independence is a key. Also, lastly, the organisations need to be data ready. I mentioned these are comprehensive reviews that take 3 to 5 months. But the more that departments or portfolios can be ready for it, the better it is. And finally, the joint team, I find, is the best approach. If you can have a team that has, like from our point of view, an EY team as well as a departmental team, what it gives us, if we've got a departmental team, it means that they know the individuals, they know the department, they know where to find the information. It makes it more efficient. On the flip side to that, if you're putting your best and brightest into that review team, it means that they are also developing their future capability to be leaders of tomorrow. Anyway, that is how we've been addressing these types of reviews in Oceania. I hope that this has been of value for you. I apologise that I couldn't be there in person today to present this live, but Mark has certainly got my personal details if you'd like any questions to just flick it directly to me and we'll come back to you. I wish you the best for the rest of the forum, and I'd like to thank the Global Government Forum for the opportunity to present to you today. Thanks very much.